Hello and welcome to another video from the lecture series entitled Advanced Biomaterials. So in today's video we will be looking at a very interesting aspect of biomedical engineering or tissue engineering, which is trying to identify a biomaterial for mimicking the process of a particular type of tissue. So in real life, how we are subjected or how we are presented with a research problem so that we need to identify a particular type of biomaterial based on the tissue or based on the system for which the material is being applied or for which the use of the material is intended for. So in today's particular scenario, we'll be looking at how we can actually select a biomaterial for mimicking the bulk properties of muscle tissue. So today's video will be focusing on choice of a biomaterial or the considerations which we need to keep in mind while choosing a biomaterial, while choosing a material for mimicking the mimicking the bulk properties of muscle tissue. So why do we need a material to mimic the properties of muscle tissue? Because muscle tissues have a very specific type of characteristic, which is contraction and relaxation. So this contractility and relaxability are essential criteria which should be present in the material which we are trying to select in order to be used as an effective replacement or a repair therapy for damaged muscle tissue. So for repair and replacement of or for sustaining the function of muscle tissue, we need to find or we need to select a biomaterial, or in order to fabricate a biomaterial which can actually mimic the bulk properties of the muscle. So we need to do it in order to repair or replace or support muscle tissue. So, since one of the most unique properties of these muscle tissues is contraction and relaxation, what type of material we can think of will have this property? So, usually polymeric materials are selected because these materials can have this property of stretchability, and they can also we can fabricate them in such a way so that they can mimic these properties of muscle tissues, right? So we can select polymeric materials and these polymers, since the property of muscle tissues is that after relaxation or after contraction, when the contracting stimuli which is responsible for contraction is removed, the muscle will relax to its or will extend back to its original shape and size. So polymers are a specific or a very special class of polymers which can be used in this approach are shape memory polymers, or polymers which exhibit this shape memory effect. So shape memory polymers. So what are shape memory polymers? Polymers or composites which show this shape memory effect can be defined or can be represented as systems which have a particular shape or which have a particular orientation, and upon addition or upon when they are subjected to an externally applied stimulus or stimuli, so their shape and size will change. But when that acting stimuli will be removed, these polymers will revert back to their original dimension. So such polymers are known as polymers which exhibit this shape memory effect, and these various types of stimuli which can be applied can be differences in or changes in their external temperature, pH, some chemically added agents which can be used to stimulate this type of relaxation. Even electrical stimuli can be used, or even light stimuli. So light dependent polymers There are many types of polymeric systems which can be fabricated, which can to show or to display this shape memory effect. So these are the different types of stimuli which can be used. So an example of such polymers which can be tuned to show this shape memory effect, or which can be synthesized with composite materials to show this shape memory effect, can be polyurethane or PU. So polyurethane is a well-known polymer which is tunable, which is known widely for their tunable shape memory behavior. So in order to make, now if we try to look into the physiology or the gross anatomy of muscle tissues, these are the tissues which are electrically stimulated, then they can contract, and upon removal of this electrical stimuli, they will relax or revert back to their original state. So this muscle tissue contraction and relaxation is mainly dependent on electrical stimulation. So we need to tune these properties of these polymers or this polymeric composite material through, so that it can respond to this electrical stimuli, or it can show a shape memory effect or a shape memory behavior through this electrical stimulation. So in order to make the stimulation possible by electrical or electronic field which is closest to the muscle tissue, a composite can be prepared by adding conductive fillers to the matrix, such as carbon nanotubes. So we need to perform complexing or complexation. So we need to make a composite by adding certain materials which can show the property of electrical stimulation, or which can show the property of electrical conductivity, changing in the electrical response when in the presence of an electrical field. So these composites can be made using materials such as carbon nanotubes. So in the section of our carbon nanoparticles, we had discussed about carbon nanotubes, and as they are conducting materials, so these materials find a wide or immense application in different fields of designing smart materials for improving the overall characteristics of a given material. So carbon nanotubes can be used or can be prepared to revolutionize this type of materials which can show this desirable tunable properties. So now once we are trying to make these types of muscles, we are trying to actually mimic the bulk properties of the muscle tissues using this type of composites, or using this type of system. So what we can do is, or what we can identify, or what we can look for in polyurethane is what causes their unique properties, or what is responsible for their bulk properties being similar to that of muscle tissues. So the polyurethane is mainly contains this group, the urethane linkage or the urethane functional group. So this is polyurethane. Right. So this specific functionality of polyurethane is responsible for a wide range of bulk properties specific for our approach. So these include, some of these properties would include, one is a significant load bearing ability. So this load bearing ability will enable this material to act as a suitable alternative to this muscle tissue, because the main bulk muscles are responsible for load bearing activities in our body. The second property which we can look for is that this material should have a high degree of flexibility. Which is also a characteristic of muscle tissues. So the third property which one can look for is high resistance to abrasion. Because of these muscle tissues are subjected to constant mechanical stresses, so these these materials should show the property of high resistance to abrasion. Then it should also suitably show decent resistance to tear, because muscle tissues are loaded and unloaded, or loaded and unloaded in different cycles. These materials should show resistance to tear. So on fatigue, this effectively mimics the loading cycle which is seen in muscles. So this should have also fatigue resistance. Finally, the hardness properties of these muscle tissues are also, or these biomaterials which we are using to mimic the properties of muscle tissues, are also important. So these materials which should be used in this case should have a very wide range of hardness. And appropriate tensile strength. Since we are trying to use them for mimicking the muscle tissues. So all these properties can be actually selected for or balanced out between making these composite materials. While adding the composites, we can tune the properties and we can find an effective balance between all these properties, which will make our material very suitable for its use as an alternative repair or replacement medium for damaged or muscle tissue which needs to be altered or which needs to be supported, right? So now this tensile strength of any material is important in its consideration for its use as a suitable replacement for any particular type of tissue. So this tensile strength is an important characteristic feature of given polymers or composites which we can actually determine. So if we look at this property, so the ultimate tensile strength of polyurethane is about 50 megapascals, which can be tuned upon creating a composite with carbon nanotubes, which is near that of muscle tissues. So after complexing, making a composite with carbon nanotubes, we can get this composite which will have properties or this ultimate tensile strength which will be very similar to that of muscle tissues. Now it has been reported to have a very high percentage of elongation at break, which also mimics the properties of muscle tissues. So this percentage elongation at break is also an important consideration, because as we just discussed, muscle tissues are subjected to cyclic stresses or cyclic wear and tears, or fatigue is an important consideration which needs to be kept into mind while designing or fabricating or choosing such biomaterials. So This will also have an elasticity modulus the modulus of elasticity, which will be similar to that of muscle tissues. Now, this shape memory effect of contraction and relaxation can be imparted to this polymer upon complexing it with carbon nanotubes because it is a conducting material. So this composite can be relaxed upon loading, which will implies that it will have a high percentage of elongation and break, and it will revert back to its original dimensions upon application of an electrical field. So now if we look at the stress strain curve or stress strain diagram of this polyurethane, so we can actually see, if we compare this graph, or we can compare this plot to that of a muscle tissue, we will see that it shows a high degree of similarity. So if we plot stress as megapascals on the y-axis and the corresponding strain as percentage, so upon stretching a material or applying strain, a strain is the change in length to the original length, or the ratio between the change in length to the original length, and stress is the force applied per unit cross-sectional area, which is same as that of the pressure stress in megapascals, which is represented in megapascals. So if we plot stress on the y-axis and strain on the x-axis, we will get a diagram which will look like this. So in this stress strain diagrams, we see one region which represents this, we can see here it represents the linear elasticity, then we see the point which is known as the yield point, here before the yield point the deformation in the material will be elastic deformation. That is, upon removal of the force or the strain or the force which is responsible for causing the deformation, the material will revert back to its original dimension. So suppose if the length of the material is getting getting stretched, and at one particular point, if that stretching force is removed, the material will revert back to its original point. That point is known as the yield point. Beyond the yield point, if force is applied, the deformation will not be linear or will not be elastic. So there will be some permanent deformation in the material after this yield point. So this point, this region will represent the strain hardening. And this overall region will be the plastic region. So such diagrams can be important for considering the material properties, or the stress strain diagrams are important for designing, for choosing a particular material to be for a very specific type of applications, because using these curves by complexing the material with different other types of additives, we can actually look at the changes in these properties, and we can tune the material based on this type of observations. So this is how actually some materials can be chosen for a specific type of application. So in this example, we have seen how we can choose a biomaterial to be so that it can act as a suitable so that it can mimic the bulk properties of muscle tissue. So just like that, different types of materials can be chosen for different types of applications. So with this, we will end today's video. So hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video. Thank you.